I'll let you take it away, Chris. Thank you.
Sounds good. Can everybody see my display here? Are we able to see that, everyone?
I still have your video up.
Oh, just the video? Let's see, I'm sharing the screen. Oh, wait, I need to actually hit share. Now we can see that.
All right, there we go. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today about dashboards, some things we've been working on over the last year or so. Today is a very special day. Not everybody gets to present on their birthday, but I get to today, so I'm excited to share some of the things we've been working on. I'm very excited. So again, today we're talking about dashboards and some of the lessons learned from implementing these dashboards over the last year or so. So the outline of how we want to present things today, we want to start with some dashboard basics. I think a lot of when we get into dashboards, we see a lot of whiz bang on kind of the front end, and this is what dashboards can do, and ESRI we can do all these amazing things, but sometimes getting into the nuts and bolts of how it works, we don't necessarily see. So that's what I'm going to try to accomplish in this presentation. So if you've done dashboards before, some of the early parts might be a little bit of a review, but if you haven't, hopefully this gives you some steps to get started on how that's going to go for you whenever you want to roll one out. We'll talk a little bit about database development, publishing the data, and then hopefully we'll have some time to do a couple of demos of some of the dashboards we've been working on. All right, so dashboard basics. I think part of what we look at when we develop a dashboard or any sort of web application, of course, we've got several considerations, kind of like writing a paper in college or something like that. You really need to consider several things. And the first thing we'll look at, of course, is audience, public or private. Who's going to be using this dashboard? Who's going to be looking at it? What sort of environment is it going to be? Is it going to be an emergency response thing? Is it going to be something that someone can use for capital planning? What sort of audience and how are they going to use that, and who needs to have access to it? Do you need to have user permissions set? Is it going to be something where someone uses one login for everybody, or everybody has their own unique logins? How are you going to use how are you have people access this dashboard? Another important part is database conditions. So how your database is structured. As GIS folks, we like to build our data and spend a lot of time making sure our data is perfect, which is actually ideal for dashboards because you want to put the data together, build a dashboard off data that's somewhat consistent and complete. We're in a process right now where we're working with a database that's in between. It's being updated. And so we're making some updates. We publish it to the dashboard, and then the database changes and we have to republish. So there's a lot of things. If you can get your database in a good condition early on, it will really help your dashboard on the front end. And that's why this graphic here, this chicken or the egg. Do you do your interface, develop how you want the interface first, or do you develop your database to match the interface? And that's kind of the ongoing questions we'll ask as we kind of walk through the rest of this presentation. Editing capability. If you want to be able to edit features in a dashboard, you really are limited to the web app builder. There's not really capability to edit within the dashboard itself on the true dashboard operations dashboard that we'll look at. And editing capability has been added to Experience Builder. It's still in beta, but it's coming along. So if editing capability is important, then that'll help focus which type of dashboard you're going to select. Also, interface requirements, desktop, mobile. The good thing about ESRI's Experience Builder is it really is going to it allows you to do a little bit of both. You can develop something for the desktop. Let me go back up one. Let me go page. Nope, it's not gonna let me go back. Oh. That's why. Let me go. There we go. So I had another window popping up over here. So it gives you the flexibility to develop both. The other important part about developing these dashboards is your interface aesthetics and your base map cartography. As a GIS person, geography and how things look on the map is very important. And when we talk about dashboards, I think it's very important for user engagement for the dashboard to look good, have good graphics, good colors that pop, and really focusing on how your base map can engage your user. And so as we go through and look at a couple of examples, it's important to develop your database with the dashboard widget requirements in mind. So whenever we're putting our data together, how is it going to fit into the way the widgets work and the way the widgets are going to sum or accumulate the data? And we'll look at some examples to help with that process. So again, I mentioned I want to start this pretty basic. If you're not familiar with ArcGIS Online, you can publish your data there. You can have your web applications. Everything lives online. And the important part here, as far as lessons learned, is really using meaningful and unique application names and data set names. We really want, so when you come in and you query or want to look for data sets that are online, it's a little bit different than how things are stored on your local desktop, and being able to find things is a little bit more tricky. So make sure when you add data and publish it online that you use meaningful names, and you also fill in the metadata so you can search for different data sets that are in your system. So once we add, whenever we look at adding dashboards, these are the options that we're going to look at. We've got Web App Builder, Dashboards, and Experience Builder. So there's, when we talk about dashboards, all these things kind of lump into one category, and there's very different ways in each way of these applications work. So Web App Builder, of course, has been around for a while, and the dashboard is really just a theme. So it's an option of way to do your web app, and it allows, we've started to move some of our applications to this dashboard, and we'll talk about why that is when we get to that example here in just a minute. But Web App Builder is, it's a dashboard theme. It has some limited flexibility or limited functionality, but it works for for basic startup. Dashboard is a true operations dashboard, and we'll look at examples of why they're different from the Web App Builder. And of course, Experience Builder is the latest and greatest that ESRI is putting out, and it really brings in the best of Web App Builder and dashboards into kind of one umbrella where you can really publish and do almost anything that you can imagine from a dashboard perspective. All right, so again, very basic. When we're talking about a Web App Builder and the dashboard theme, some of the themes that we're looking at here, like foldable theme is a very popular one. I like the dashboard theme, and primarily because we can anchor windows. You can always anchor windows in some of the other ones as well. I just like the way that we can set up a specific window just for the layer list, just for the legend, just for the tools, and it doesn't take away from your mapping area. And kind of like the way we work in ArcMap is the concept. And we've actually migrated a lot of our viewers to the dashboard theme just because it allows us aesthetically to put things where we want them to go. The one thing that's limiting on Web App Builder is the reporting widgets are still very basic, and there's a limited customization to those widgets. So you can add a bunch of different widgets that will do editing and features like drawing and measuring, but they're very limited in how you can actually customize them. The other benefit to Web App Builder is that it's good for both mobile and desktop applications. So almost all of these themes that we're looking at show up well in both places. There are drawbacks to some based on how they show up, but overall, it's pretty flexible on how they can look in both platforms. So that's very powerful just to get your data published. Now, a true operations dashboard has a lot more functionality and flexibility to how you customize the widgets and how it looks. The one thing to note that's clear on dashboards is these are almost exclusively for desktop. If I were to open up the dashboard you see on the screen here, you're actually going to see kind of a jumbled mess because it doesn't resize correctly for a mobile phone. So that's where, again, the Experience Builder has really come into play, because it takes something like you're looking at a dashboard here, and then you can also build a custom version that works for mobile as well. And again, we'll look at how this particular dashboard is built and how some of the linkages between the data sets work behind the scenes. And of course, I mentioned Experience Builder. This is the latest and greatest. You can see there's a bunch of options and templates that they've set up for us to work with, which is very helpful, but it can be a little overwhelming as well. We haven't done a lot with Experience Builder. We're learning and trying to do more applications for communities that we work for with this, but we're still having some growing pains as we learn how to use these. The one thing, of course, is you have all these different ways you can customize, and it's almost overwhelming, to be real honest, with all the ways you can customize and how much different this interface is, the web app builder. But it doesn't take long whenever you're editing and working with this to realize how powerful it really is. The one thing I noted, of course, is editing is something that's still in beta for the web app builder or for the experience builder. And this is something that we needed some dashboards that could do some editing and changing data. We're seeing those things get rolled over into the experience builder, which will help improve that operation as well. So those are the three types of dashboards that you can roll out. So once we have decided which dashboard form I want to look at, we want to look at uploading our data. And of course, we can put things on ArcGIS Online as feature classes. Dashboards and Experience Builder both support being able to insert embedded applications, and Survey 123 can fit right into those items a lot easier than maybe say in a web app builder or web app builder. So if you're looking through those, Survey 123, if your application, if your database is in Survey 123, you might be looking at an experience builder or dashboard operation to really showcase that data. There are exceptions, but that's kind of the way the newer interfaces are really integrating those things together. The one important part about building your database behind the scenes is dashboards don't always require to have pre-established feature relationships. And what I mean by that is, we build our geodatabases with relationships. For example, we're doing a capital improvement project database. We have the projects in one database, and then we've also got all the parts that make up that individual project in a different database, and we link those together with unique IDs. Well, we can have those IDs set up in the back end, but we can also, if those IDs exist in each table, we can actually link those things together on the front end of our dashboard as well. So there's a lot of flexibility once you get your data published, how the dashboard can do the summaries and do the things that make the charts and everything look great. You can do a lot of that on the front end. The other part that's important to recognize is identifying a good workflow. I've been working with GIS for well over 20 years. I learned on command line ArcInfo. So some of these newer technologies still I'm a little slow to adopt them. So I like to publish things on the local geodatabase where I can edit and do work on those and then publish them online to ArcGIS Online. Then I can then publish them in the dashboards or the web application. So I like to have things locally and publish them online just so I have duplicate data and I make sure everything's kind of backed up, and it's easier for me to work on the desktop with a local geodatabase than maybe necessarily working with data online. You can do that. I just prefer the local geodatabase. All right, for this example, I do want to go through this application, this dashboard application that I built on my own, primarily to track COVID. I haven't updated this dashboard in probably well over 6 months or so. When everything kind of died down, I did not pick it up when everything spiked this summer. But ultimately, this dashboard is something I put in to track how things were changing with COVID. I really wanted to see where the case counts and the 7-day averages, how are they changing? We see the numbers report on the news, but how are they actually changing and what are the trends? And that's really why I put this dashboard together. So to build this dashboard is very basic. I'm just going to kind of run through these pretty quickly, but essentially I was able to download or copy and paste the data that was published at the State Department of Health's website. And I was able to come through and paste it into Excel, format it accordingly, and then come in and actually make this summary table. And this little summary table that it's at the bottom is what I use to actually build a lot of the charts that we see on the dashboard. So really it's just using Excel to do all these calculations, and I published it into a local copy on ArcMap, did the edits, made sure everything was the way it should be, and then I pushed it up to ArcGIS Online. There's probably some ways to automate this to make this process more efficient, but in the end, this is kind of how I work through doing the dashboard for the state of Washington. So here's a look at just the data, the points behind the scenes. And then, of course, once that's published, I think the cool thing is that when we talk about dashboards and how our data is formatted, it's important to see kind of how such simple data can yield such nice results in charting. So by summarizing these values, I kind of, through trial and error, learned how these things should be formatted so that I'm able to make these charts that easily show the case counts per day and then the overall trend, the 7-day average. And again, a lot of it's built on calculations with Excel. And the reason I highlight this is because it's very simple to make these things you don't have to have a complex geodatabase behind the scenes to run this. It's very straightforward as long as you have the data behind the scenes. So these are some of the charts I was able to build from this. Very, very helpful to be able to see basic data in these formats. The other thing is looking at this dashboard for the COVID. These were the 4 major items that are in there: the actual dashboard itself, the data layers that I updated daily, and then the actual web map. So these were the layers that were incorporated in that dashboard that you see there. And primarily the 7-day case change total, that first field in the layers, and then the daily case summary were the fields that almost everything is based off of. All the other items were pretty much static as far as how they changed. They were just base map elements. But I was able to get those things published, and that's what I was able to build the dashboard from that fairly simple data. All right, so that covers kind of how we build the dashboards and just kind of the summary. I would like to see if I can get into a quick set of demos here. Hopefully everyone can still see the screen. So this specific application is a dashboard application done with Web App Builder. So essentially, again, like I said, I like to have these things kind of anchored and have the map area focused in the middle. I like having a legend here for the users to know exactly what's on the map without having to pop up a separate window to see what the items are. So as we zoom in, things show up in the legend that identify what we're looking at on the map. I can easily scroll through and turn things on and off based on what I want to look at. And then we've got our tools down here for the editor. If you want to be able to edit, we've got some things to draw and measure. These things are all kind of anchored in the respective locations. So even though this dashboard isn't like a true widget enabled dashboard that does a bunch of flashy things, it's very simple in the way it displays, and I think it's very useful for the user. The one element I'll look at is that I added for this one is the analysis tools. So behind the scenes, for all these point data, these are citizen locations for the tribe, I was able to build in some data as far as where things are located. So I can quickly come in here and use these tools to filter out what we're seeing in the map. So we zoom in, we're going to be looking at just the points here that are in Tulsa County. And then we can even zoom in a little bit further and say, okay, show me just the ones that are in the city of Bixby. Turn my filter off, there we go. So now we're looking at just the points in the city of Bixby, and then we've added additional filters here. So now I can show the ones that are just in the floodplain. So see the count totals here update and reflect the numbers. So now I'm looking at 121 citizens that are in Tulsa County, in the city of Bixby, that are also in the floodplain. Again, these are very simple point data with attributes that these filters are working off of. And so we get this kind of sense of interaction without a lot of overhead and how we build this. Now, could this be more sophisticated and sexy as far as how it looks at data? Absolutely. But for now, it was a great way to just showcase the citizen locations with some of the basic filtering tools. The other item I wanted to highlight was this dashboard and this is a true operations dashboard for the city of Lawton. So here we've got several different points. We've got all the list of the CIP projects that are here. We've got some filters here that allow us to sort. So if I want to sort by anything that's just in the ad valorem, now we're looking at these ad valorem projects. We can click on this, it's going to zoom and show us the detailed data behind the scenes of that particular project. We can also click on this, it's going to show us a nice photo of what's going on. So there's a lot of things that this dashboard does. Here's the Survey 123 form that's behind the scenes, so things can be edited. We can edit this existing data, or we can add new projects to the database. We've also got our prioritization listing. We've got the data tables, and this is actually something that's built in Experience Builder that I'm putting into our dashboard here. So it's just an embedded content item. And then we have these charts here that allow us to see how projects are distributed. And of course, they respond to the filters as well. So there's a lot of things going on here, but in the short amount of time I have before we need to open this up to questions, I did want to look at some of the things behind the scenes. So like for filtering for funding sources. We saw that when we select this, it filters out the things we see on the map, and it filters out the list here of these items, and it also adjusts these costs. So for the 2018 ad valorem, we're looking at the actual funds indicated for that versus the overall funds when the filter is not active. So behind the scenes, this is, we're looking at the data source for all the funding sources. This is our category field. The one thing that's really cool are the actions here. So this is where I talk about we don't necessarily have to have the relationship. As long as these both have a funding source in the respective tables, then it's going to be able to adjust the list according to what funding source you select. These are the indicators that we highlight for cost, and you can see that those are filtered when this item is selected. And then these are the individual items that show up on the map. These are also sorted out if they match the funding source. And then these are the charts that show up. Those things are also filtered according to what's in this list. So you can see that when you make a selection in this category selector, it changes several different items on the map. And this is kind of where the dashboard is really, really powerful as far as how things interact together on the maps and what we're looking at. Let's see if there's anything else. This project list here, for example, again, whenever you select an element in the project list, it's going to show the selection details. It's going to show the funding details for that particular project. It's also going to update the little funding chart we saw at the bottom. And then these project funds calculations that we saw in the lower right, left-hand corner will all get updated. So there's a lot of flexibility with how you can control what happens with a click on the map. And so we'll see these things pop up here. So there's a lot of flexibility with how you build things in dashboards, and it looks like I'm up against the time a little bit. I did want to highlight just a couple more dashboards. I'll probably take one more minute, then we'll open up for questions before we go to lunch. This was an example of a web viewer that we had. This is using the standard, this is for the city of Wagner, for Wagner County. This is using the standard web app builder. We were able to put things in here with the layer list and other items, but we went ahead and pushed this to a dashboard, and now we have a lot more flexibility with how things show up in the legend. We can also format things like picking our communities. It's going to zoom to that community, and these widgets over here are going to reflect the changes here. So here we're looking at buildings in the floodplain. We're able to show these calculations here, the numbers that match the community filter. We've also got some NFIP information that's important as far as repetitive losses and claims. So there's a lot of data that can be built in behind the scenes. And again, it's nice having the legend list here to show you what the symbols on the map mean without having to pull up a separate window. So there's a lot of flexibility in how how dashboards allow you to view the data and really showcase the exciting things that you're doing. So with that, I'm right at, it looks like 11:53, so I will make sure at least some time for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for that presentation. And we're not too pressed on time since I think there's no presenter after you. We're just going to go straight into lunch. Okay. So for everyone out there, please do remember that you can post to the Q&A here. And if I get them in time, we can have them answered by Chris now, or, throughout the conference, if you think of something, you can always come back to this chat room or the chat room or the Q&A and post your question, and Chris can come back to it later even. In the meantime, so something I really like the aesthetic quality of a lot of the demos and dashboards that you showed. I think I'm definitely guilty of not thinking about those things sometimes when I'm setting up a dashboard. I'm like, just get data out there to people. And I think you've jumped that hurdle. Do you have tips or do's and don'ts that you're thinking about when you're setting up these visuals of things that make it easier for people to visualize and engage with the data a little more?
I wish I had a magic formula. It's kind of like it's an artist thing. I mean, I don't know how else to explain. I've been working on these things for 20 years, and I just have some people just have that kind of artistic thing to it, and I've worked so hard to try to communicate that to other folks on our staff, and I think they see the way I put things together, and I think they kind of have been able to leverage those and make everything kind of look the same. I don't have any specific tips and tricks. I mean, I do just focus on aesthetics and how things are, color matches, how things pop. I think that's a really, even like rainbow colors, they kind of teased me early on because I worked for an engineering company. Everything was kind of skittle colored. I had a lot of pastels and bright colors because I thought that just really helped communicate data better. So I think when I think about what you can do to like make your maps look better, I think focusing back on some of those original cartographic principles that we maybe took in our geography classes, of course. And the other thing too is looking at existing dashboards that are out there. A lot of the dashboard functionality that I've learned over the last few years has really been by looking at other applications and seeing how they're done. And then I'm like, okay, I like that. I want to aesthetically incorporate that into what I'm doing. So I think looking at other work that's been done and then just, having just imagination on how you want these things to look. It's just an intangible item. And it's something that I've just always done. And again, I probably spend more time working on aesthetics sometimes than I do actually working on data. So that can be frustrating when I, spend all this time tweaking these labels so they show up correctly. When I spend like an hour just trying to make street labels show up right, that can be, in the project, that can be like, what are you doing? But I'm actually, trying to cartographically make things look better. So I definitely think it's important to just make sure you put a focus on it, an emphasis on it. And then again, look at examples of what other folks have done and see if that's something that you value and you can incorporate into the mapping that you're doing.
Awesome. Great insight. Thank you. Another question I had on your COVID dashboard example, I think it was you showed that workflow where you're going from Excel and then throwing your data up. Maybe it was hosted to get into your dashboard. In that workflow, are you doing all of your summarizing outside of sort of the ARC environment, like you're doing it before you load things in, or was that more of a starting point?
It's a very good question. I did both. I actually went through, when I first started, I was doing everything in ARC map because I'm just so comfortable with ARC map, and I'm still in the process of integrating everything to Pro. But for me, it was much easier just to add the fields, do the calculations in ARC map. That was getting extremely cumbersome because it just wasn't fast enough for how I want to go through. It was just taking too much time. So then I did switch to where really almost all the calculations and summaries were all done in Excel. And I was just copying and pasting the data in and moving all the data over one column and then republishing that data. So I got to where the only thing I really did in GIS software per se was an ARC map. I brought in the spreadsheet, put that together, published it, put it in ARC map, and then, in ARC Pro, and then published it online. So I did hardly any GIS work on that. It was almost all the data calculations were done in Excel and then published. And then when I got to the dashboard, and I would just have to update a couple of things because when the data was overwritten with the new data, all the widgets and all the applications would all reset and go with the right values.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I'm always questioning sometimes whether to do certain processing innately in the dashboard or sort of outside that environment. So that was really helpful to think about.
Yeah, and as a GIS person, I hated doing that, but it just made more sense to do it in Excel. So
great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris. For everyone out there, just remember to post your questions if you want to think about those for a little bit. And if possible, we will be providing a recording for the conference attendees to come back to when they click on this session. So if you want to see some of Chris's examples of how he set things up, this should be available for you to think about and then come back to.
Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the things in the chat there. I really had fun presenting on this stuff, and I went really fast, so hopefully everybody was able to keep up. I felt like I'm out of breath a little bit, but hopefully we covered everything. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have enjoy lunch.